All right, welcome back to Spirit Squared. I'm Andrew Darrington, your host. Well, tonight we have our 5th episode, and we've got a lot of great content to cover, and we've got a great guest. First thing first, I want to hype up Stars and Staves. They sent this nice shirt to me. There are people commenting that I need to get new shirts, and so I just sent a note out, please send me more apparel, and if there's anybody out there that wants me to hype their stuff, send it over. But Stars and Staves, they do great work. They do charity work as well on their internet site. They also have some things coming. So starsandstaves.com, they're going to be working with the distiller, and that's all I can say to this point. That's going to be their exclusive provider of their apparel. So big things coming from them. Also big things is our guests. We are going to be talking about some insurance and some cool new things that are happening in that world. We've got Collin Phaup, who is the owner of Goosehead Insurance in Tyler.
Yes.
I was notified today that your Goosehead Insurance is in the top 15 in the nation.
Yeah, little old Tyler, Texas. So if you look at the top 1% of all the Goosehead franchises in the country, and it's a relatively new, company, so to speak, in the grand scheme of things, but there's over 3,000 operating franchises in the United States, 32 states, and yeah, we're in that top 15, so that top 1%. We were number 3 in the South Central United States last month, so had a record month. We had our previous record by $20.
Yeah, hey, record's a record.
But record's a record, man. Yeah. So, but it always leaves you hungry for more, and it's really cool because if you look at the list of the top agencies in South Central, it's Dallas, it's Austin, Houston, and that just list keeps compiling with those large metro areas. And then here you have, right there, amongst the big boys, you've got Tyler, Texas.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool.
Right, absolutely.
But I think it speaks to the model, but it also speaks to the agency itself and the people that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're in the throngs of fall, right? Football season. You're starting to feel some of the weather coming on.
Oh no, it's great.
Yeah,
I almost debated on doing the sweatshirt rides today because I've got the Goose Gang sweatshirt, so we may have to hook you up with some swag.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'd put a Goose shirt in the rotation.
I'm surprised that your shirt's not burnt orange.
Ah, man, listen, there is a version of it, and this is a classic, this particular one, because it says making insurance sexy.
Right, I saw it
on the back.
Yeah.
It's a collector's item at this point.
Oh, wow.
It's like a first edition. They don't make them anymore.
Okay.
But there is one that's burnt orange, and I've got my eye on it. I'm trying to secure it. I'm going to have to do a lot of favors.
Right. After a big win, pretty excited about this season?
I am. I actually had a bet with the Goosehead agency owner that's in Arkansas, but is a huge Alabama fan.
Okay.
And we actually bet a bottle of whiskey.
Oh, okay.
So I had to send him a Texas whiskey if Alabama won. So he's going to send me an Alabama whiskey.
Okay.
If Texas wins, I don't know what I'm going to get because I don't know about any Alabama whiskeys at all. I really don't. I knew what I was going to send him. It was going to be a nice pot still balconies.
Right.
Just something super cheap, like here, enjoy.
Right.
I hope you don't choke on it.
Yeah. $33 worth of whiskey.
If I know anything about Steve Wilson, shout out Steve Wilson. If I know anything about him, I'm probably going to get, I hope it's from like Peapaw Still or something.
Well, right.
But I have a feeling it's going to be some really classic Alabama.
With the wheat stick hanging out. By the way, Collin and I are drinking a Old Forester 117 series. It's only distributed in Kentucky. I found a way to get it to Texas. They offered in these 375s because the barrel yield is pretty low. This one's 98 proof. Drinks pretty good, pretty smooth. So just want to make sure that you guys knew what was in our glass. I heard you have a room dedicated.
I do.
To the volunteers.
So I know that you've been talking to. Yeah, like who's been to my house?
Yeah, I haven't. Well,
you'll have to come check it.
It'll do my dig. I don't want to show interest in like, yeah,
absolutely. And then if you're not a Texas fan, don't be offended by the room.
Right.
If the Lord didn't love the Longhorns, he wouldn't have made the sunset burnt orange. Okay, so there's a lot of burnt orange in this room.
Right.
But we moved into a new house, which is a real blessing at the end of March. And I actually have, there's in that guest room,
Right.
probably was a big walk-in closet is a bar area.
Okay.
So now I actually have cabinet space.
That.
So rather than doing a housewarming, we did a stock the bar.
Right.
And I got a lot of cool stuff. It was a smart idea to invite some folks from the whiskey group.
Yeah.
Because their tastes are better than mine.
That's right.
And so I got a lot of neat stuff. I got the JTS Brown. I mean, there was some nice stuff in there.
Yep.
Got some good tequilas as well. But yeah, there's a lot of burnt orange in that room.
Yeah.
Cool. And so, you know, it's kind of neat.
Yeah. I know plenty of people that have like OU rooms and Cowboys rooms and stuff like that. I had to borrow you a little bit because I did find out some things on you. Nothing, you know, nothing crazy. Nothing like some prior guests. Nothing like some prior guests. So walk us through your, obviously, years into the business, 18,
yeah,
I think you said.
10 years.
So walk us back. You're getting out of college.
Yeah.
And what were your influences and what were you wanting to do?
Yeah. Never wanted to do insurance. My dad was an insurance professional for 28 years. And so, you know, insurance was like my first job, like filing and dumping the trash, those kind of things. You know, so it was like a real stuffed shirt business to me because I saw, you know, how Dad did it, which Dad's still one of the most incredible insurance professionals ever. His mentorship was invaluable.
Yeah.
But, you know, he wore the starched white dress shirt and the dress pants that could probably stand up on end because they had so much starch in them. And I was like, man, this is stuffed shirt. I don't know if this is for me. And that's not really my vibe. I mean, you know, this was the guy that followed String Cheese Incident for a summer. Doing the hippie jam band thing at one point. You know, I look at old pictures of me and I'm like, why did my wife marry me? Like, she saw clearly some kind of future investment.
Yeah, exactly.
And we can call them never wanted to do insurance. I thought it sounded really boring. But speaking of that wife, you know, I met her in 2004. And I knew if I wanted to be with her, I needed to move back home. She was an ultrasound program, going to come out with a really good job. Making more money than I was going to. Yeah. And so I knew if I wanted to be with her, I needed to move back home. And so I was in Dallas.
Okay.
So I was in school in Dallas. And so we did the long distance thing for a year. Got back here in 2005. And at that point decided insurance was at least a job. Right. But funny story on that, because insurance was my first job. It's now going to end up being my last job. But it was also the first job I ever got fired from. So worked for my dad, like I said, and so I figured out, because everything back in that day, I'm gonna really date myself here. You know, when I was a kid, I was 12 years old when this happened. Everything was on triplicate. So if somebody came in to do some insurance business, there'd be 3 copies of it. There'd be a company copy, there would be a customer copy, and then a Phaup for the agency. So filing was my job. My dad had rows and rows of filing cabinets, just a ton of them. And because he had a lot of clients. And so my job was to file those papers. And I figured out that I could do that job really quickly if I just put all of those in one file. Right? So like all those papers, I was like, okay, cool. This one's really light. You know, this folder doesn't have a lot in it. Put them in there. And so I was like, cool. So I did that for a little while. And I guess that started to cause a problem in the office. And my dad's secretary at the time found that file. And brought it to my dad and said, hey, here's everything we've been missing. So when I got into work that day after school, Dad said, hey, I want you to come in here, sit down with me. And so I sit down in his office. He closes the door and he sits down. He said, son, you're not going to understand this now, but one day this is going to be a really good lesson for you. So he opens up that file and there's that giant stack of papers at this point, probably a week's worth of filing in this thing. And he said, listen, you know, we have these, we keep these copies because we need to refer back to them. And you know, Lisa's been looking for these all week. We put us in a really bad spot. So I just want to let you know, there's no shortcuts in life. There's no shortcuts in business. But we're no longer going to need your services here. Well, I was like, wow, wait, hang on a second. I'm 12. I'm like, am I fighting right now? Are you fighting your son? You're firing me? And he said, yeah, you just can't take shortcuts. And unfortunately, you took a big one and it put us in a bad spot. And so we're just not going to need your services here anymore. So it's really funny because when I was, fast forward now to, 2005 and I'm moving back and I need a job. My dad says, well, look, I'm degree, you can do whatever you want to do. But, I know you need a job. So why don't you come work with me at the insurance agency? And I said, wait a minute, am I rehirable?
Right. You better very contact HR.
Listen, that stuck with me. And, one of the other things he always said was don't quit a job before you get a job. So I've consistently worked from the time I wanted to drive. I was about 15 years old. I worked in high school. I worked through college. So instilled a really good work ethic in me. But I just thought that was really funny that, life comes full circle sometimes.
Sure.
I was like, man, I can't believe I'm about to go back to work here at the insurance agency. But, my misconception about insurance was that it was just really boring and stuff, sure. But my dad empowered me to do it my way.
Yeah.
But also having his experience in the office with me was super valuable because there is absolutely no substitute, for experience in the insurance business.
Sure, I bet.
And so having his knowledge base next door to me for the first 8 years of my career was just super valuable because there's stuff comes up all different scenarios, different claims. Is this covered? Is it not? I'm like, policy setting 2 pages. So having him, next to me was just really valuable.
Yeah, I bet.
And so, I figured out real quickly though that in insurance, it's not just sales, which I was a theater kid, growing up, had the big personality. So like sales came naturally to me. But you get to wear a lot of hats. You get to be a private investigator sometimes because, buyers are liars in a lot of cases, right? They'll tell you, you never had any tickets or accidents. And then you run the MBR and you're like, oh, that's not true.
That was MBR.
MBR, yeah, motor vehicle report.
Okay, MBR.
MDR, yes, sorry.
I'm sorry, I sound like yes and everything. When they usually
never understand
maybe something. So sorry if I startled you, but I want to make sure that the folks that are viewing to kind of get the full.
I'm trying not to use
it's okay.
Jargon, too much jargon there it is. But you get to be that private investigator. You get to do sales. But like the satisfying part, obviously, is saving people money. But you also are dealing with people when they're in some of their worst moments, right? Like something's happened in their home, their most valuable possession. They've had an auto accident. There's just different things that come up that give you, the ability to actually, change a situation for someone. Obviously, if you've done a good job, you've given them the protection that they need, but you could take a negative situation, and try and make it well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had a situation like that this week where a mother lost her son, and that son had a possession that she wanted back. She was in Virginia. We were able to coordinate some things, get the item back to her.
Yeah.
And you could hear the breath she took. It was like,
yes,
it's an unmistakable breath that you hear from someone that's relieved. All of a sudden, they were worried about it for 12 to 14, 18 hours, 2 days, 3 days. They talked to friends about it, and bam, here it is.
Agonizing.
And you shouldered it.
Yeah.
Took it back.
So the best feeling.
So you're 8 years with your dad.
Yep.
You see a bunch of situations. I'm sure you have a ton of stories, but you decide to take the plunge to buy your own agency, correct?
Yeah. With his blessing and encouragement, the story of how I started with Goosehead is actually really cool. And the Goosehead story overall is really cool. But, we saw some things. Dad was with a captive carrier, right? You've got the State Farms, Farmers, the Allstates of the world there, where the agent works for the carrier.
Yes.
We saw some things happening, with the captive carrier that, he'd been partnered with for 20 plus years.
Sure.
At that point, we saw some things happening that we just were like, man, there's got to be a better way here. In 2008, we go into the recession, and every dollar matters, right? And you only got one option for people when you're captive. And, it got to be really tough because the clients that were leaving, they weren't leaving for service. They weren't leaving based on claims. They were leaving based on price.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really tough when you're a captive. I mean, you're forced, it's almost a crisis of conscience, really, because it's like, look, I don't have any other options for you. So our options are we cut your coverage, we raise your deductibles, and ship more of the burden back to you to save you temporarily, really, on insurance. We have to watch you walk out the door. And it was the clients that have been with them 20 plus years that were walking out the door.
Yeah.
Right? And it was big money, hundreds of dollars a month. And in that time period, I mean, even now, obviously, like that's just a lot for anybody to bear.
Sure.
They can love you all day, but if somebody can save them $2,000 a year on insurance, they're gone. And that's a business decision, right? We understood that. But we thought, how do we address this? And Dad's idea was, look, you need to be in a choice model, right? We need to go independent and do something independently for you, because I don't know that this is the future, that captive model. And so it's really funny because we tossed that around for a while. A story I like to tell is that Goosehead came for Dad and they left with me. It was like their parting gift. But in reality, the company trends young. And so I think it was really the best fit. But, here come these two gals from Goosehead, and they walk into Dad's office one day, and I'm like, okay, I don't even know what a Goosehead is. Yeah, what we're doing. And we looked at other, IAs, independent agencies, the conglomerates, the Brightways of the world, TWFG, and some of these other companies that you can partner with. And it makes it easier to start an independent agency. Sure. We'd looked at those. We'd never heard of Goosehead. But they brought in two absolute all-stars to talk to us about the opportunity. But I just couldn't get over the name. I was like, this is such a stupid name. So I left halfway through that meeting. But my dad stayed and listened to what they had to say. And when I came into work the next day, he's like, look, really, I think we need to kind of see what this is about. They asked us to go visit. At that time, they'd only had a handful of agencies launch. And so we went and visited a couple of their other agencies, that already launched, went and visited their executive team at their corporate office. And, listen, my dad just said to me one day, it said, honestly, I don't want you to inherit something that's in a dying model. If these captive models weren't so well-funded and well-advertised, they couldn't compete in this marketplace. Right. If I had to start all over, which is what you're going to have to do, you're going to have to start from scratch. Yeah. This is who I would do it with.
Because he was going to hand you the book of business.
They had a really good transition plan. Yeah. That captive model had a good failing transition plan. So that was, my thought was I would just I'll go pick up a couple of carriers. I'll move down the hall at the office. Sure. When they're ready to leave this company, I'll offer them these two and we don't have to just lose them completely. But the Goosehead model was, hey, look, you got to have a storefront. It doesn't have to be anything special, but it has to be a physical space, and we need, you to actually run this, right? And so, I think it was just something that we really carefully considered, and he said, look, I just really think this is what you should do, and so I jumped with both feet in. The Goosehead story is really interesting. I'm going to take down different, please. So the Goosehead model is really interesting. How they came about is actually really cool. So the founders of the company, Mark and Robin Jones, Mark was working for Bain & Company. He was an executive. And so he was doing very well. His wife, Robin, they got, several kiddos, and, she had investment properties, and she just was not getting good service on her insurance policies. And she just said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And she just told Mark, I'm going to launch an insurance agency. And what she realized really quickly was hey, if we surround this with really good peripheral services, this is something that's scalable. Right. And so when Goosehead started, it was just, they had a corporate office. It was agents in a call center, but they had a really amazing service team. Net promoter scores on this service team is higher than Ritz-Carlton and Apple, right? They just hired really good people to service the book. And they thought, with our portfolio and this service piece, we're really missing the mark by not franchising this. And so that's when they started, looking at agencies that could benefit from that. Most of them were captive agencies. And so that's how they found us, was they wanted their first agency in East Texas. They only had, 10 at the time. I was the 12th agency to launch. So I launched my Goosehead agency in January of 2013. Wow. So a little over 10 years, the first in East Texas. And there's something to be said for being the first in the market, right? You really get to establish yourself, but more, I had to brand, and that's not easy. It's not easy to brand something, especially with the name Goosehead, right? And I thought it was so silly. And I'll tell you the story because I think it's a great story. People are like, Goosehead, where did that come from? Yeah. They were into hunting.
I was about to follow you out. You glossed over it.
Listen, my dad, when we go up to the corporate office to sign my contract, we're starting the agency. At that time, it was in Las Colinas. Okay. Now it's in Westlake. It's in the DFW area. We go up there, and there's a goose call outside the boardroom up there. And so we signed the contract. Dad goes out, and, he's an avid hunter. And so he grabs that goose call, and he blows that goose call. And, I mean, in this area, it's a pretty confined space. Yeah. He knew how to blow the ball. Yeah. And so, you had people coming out from the service floor. You had people coming out of the executive offices. What is going on? Nobody had ever blown the goose ball. So we were forever synonymous with that. Like anytime I ever went up to the corporate office, they're like, "How's your dad?" Everybody loved it.
Oh, I bet.
But it's just really cool. To have that choice model, it helped us grow and scale much more quickly. And then having a lot of that taken off of your plate. Right. Because of the service piece of it, it lets you focus on what you do really well.
Right.
And when I was at the captive agency, we were forced to service exceptionally on our own. Otherwise, they had no real reason to stay. Goosehead that takes that off your plate, and they have people that do it way better than I ever could have done it. And it let me stay focused on sales, which is really just incredible. But the name, circle back to that. So Mark and Robin, they've got several kiddos. Their first grandchild, when she was born, name's Lucy. Mm-hmm. She came out goose feathered hair. They called her Lucy Goosey. That was her nickname, was Lucy Goosey. Right. And that just evolved into them calling her Goosehead. Goosehead was her nickname.
Okay.
So when I go into a place and I say I'm with Goosehead Insurance, and they know State Farm, they know Farmers, they know Allstate, but they never heard of Goosehead. So when I'm branding, it's like, I'm with Goosehead Insurance. They're like, okay, hang on. You got to tell me that story. Yeah. So what I thought was going to be an obstacle with the name ended up being an actual icebreaker.
Right.
Like I'd have to go to tell that story. When I say it's a family name, they're like, okay, you got to tell the story of how Goosehead becomes a family name.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nickname of one of the granddaughters, and it kind of helps you break the ice and then talk about your point of difference. Tell them about how we're different than a captive agency, based on choice and based on being hyper-focused, mostly in the real estate market. So the majority of our referrals come from our real estate partners, on mortgage professionals, title, financial advisors, all, are really good, warm referrals, because people have that immediate need. And then we write homeowners insurance or review their entire portfolio with auto and umbrella, flood insurance, and all the fun stuff too, the jet skis and the boats and travel trailers and motorhomes and all.
Yeah, it's cool, man. I had a question in there, but
I did. I put all of that at you. Just one keeping spoon.
Yeah, that's no. I know.
We'll tell the story a lot.
Yeah, I know. I could tell. I could tell really well too. So I've been to your office now.
Yeah,
nice office. Well, have this modern, little, real sleek, and just very linear. I mean, it's an awesome office. And by the way, when people were asking me who was going to be on the podcast, I was, told them who was, and if they knew who you were, then obviously Collin, great guy, this, that, and the other. But if they didn't know, then I would tell them, well, they Goosehead Insurance, and they're like, huh? And so,
still
earlier this week, I called up your office. I didn't talk to you.
Yeah,
talked to one of your agents. Yeah, and went through the process of being quoted, and I liken it to. And pardon me if this comes across the wrong way, but I think this is the way it works, is if you wanted to book a flight with American Airlines, you just book with American Airlines.
Right.
And then you don't know if you're saving more by going to Southwest or going to Delta or going to Sun Country if you're flying overseas. And with your company, I liken it to like Travelocity or Kayak.
Yeah.
Or where you're the one-stop shop, right. You're the face that I'm talking to that's going to help me pick the best policy, and you're gonna do the legwork for me,
right.
With my circumstances and what I want to cover, and all the X and O's, and then you write the policy that fits my best need with the best care.
That's perfect.
Makes sense?
That's a great that's a great way to frame it. I mean, we do, because we don't work for the insurance carriers. We have a responsibility to write good business,
right?
With our carrier partners, but our ultimate responsibility is to our clients and our partners, right?
Right.
And so it's 100% that way. So when we've got 80 plus carriers in our portfolio, we serve a broad segment of the market. We got a lot of boxes, and I keep going back to captive agencies, but they expect everybody to fit in the same size box, right? And it's just nice to have boxes. So basically, our process is that, we figure out what's important to you, right? And then we don't sell it to you, we help you buy it. So we go to our portfolio, we go to our market, we address the concerns, we help manage your risk, and then we make recommendations based on our knowledge and our experience, right? So I think what the industry wants you to do is focus on price alone.
Right.
Like, I mean, we're all inundated with a ton of insurance advertisements, and 9 times out of 10, those insurance advertisements are based on price, right? Discount double checks. We can save you 15 minutes. Will save you this much, you know, on your auto insurance, right? But without an advisor, a lot of times you're just left to assume that that good price is giving you some kind of good policy.
Right.
And then, listen, companies have made it so easy to shop online, you know, to call an 800 number and, you know, they're going to give you their best overall price, but they're not having coverage discussions in most cases, right? And so, you know, we stay protection focused, but usually by virtue of our robust portfolio, we can give you the best of both worlds. Right? We can give you a competitive rate while still making sure that you have the protection that you deserve or that you desire. And so that's why I say we help you buy it. You know, but honestly, like, I think companies in a lot of cases just rely on people's ignorance. Especially when you shop online, you don't realize what you're giving up in a lot of cases, especially with homeowners insurance or like auto insurance. Like, why is uninsured motorist important? Why is personal injury protection important? You know, how much would roadside or rental have been with homeowners insurance? Like, you know, you got water discharge, but do you have sewer and drain backup coverage? Do you have foundation water damage protection? Do you have seepage and leakage? Are they paying you full replacement cost on your roof? You know, we are 100% in the midst of statistically the hardest insurance market in the last 40 years. So in a soft market, carriers have, you know, expanded eligibility. They have really loose underwriting guidelines. Their pricing reflects their desire to absorb business.
That sounds like pre-2008.
Yeah, pre-2008 and really writing loans for, you know, pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a part of the story of how we got into this hard market and why it's the hardest I've ever seen, certainly. And
when you say it hard, what does that mean?
Yeah, so a hard market as opposed to that soft market where everybody wants to gobble up business. In a hard market, profitability is down. And so carriers restrict their guidelines. They tighten their belt on underwriting. They focus more on condition, credit profiling. You know, a lot of carriers right now are just pumping the brakes on new business. Even some of the carriers in our portfolio have said, hey, unless it fits a certain, you know, market, we don't want it. So again, it's great to be in that choice model because of that. But, you know, COVID provided the perfect storm for us. So, you know, in 2020, when all of that went down, you know, people were home more often. So they weren't having, you know, water losses were being caught quickly. Incidences of theft went down because people were home. You didn't see the same number of fires and things like that. On auto insurance side of it, that was the property side. On the auto side, people weren't driving. And so carriers' profitability went through the roof. I mean, to the point where they were getting like rebates and givebacks on the auto insurance side of things. And so carriers started looking at that forecast. What does this look like coming out of COVID? And they missed the mark badly. They really thought that coming out of COVID, that work from home would be much more common, that we would stay off the roads, wouldn't be driving as much. People were still going to be home, you know, pretty often. And instead of that, we came out of COVID and people were like, I'm back on the road and I'm going back to work in a lot of cases, right? And so what we saw was, you know, they took a huge hit based on, you know, their loss forecasts. Profitability goes, you know, into a nosedive because of that. And then you also had the labor market, have a labor shortage. You've got material shortages as well, which made the cost of reconstruction, the cost of replacing parts and things like that much more expensive for carriers. Yep. And then to provide the absolute tsunami over the last 18 to 24 months, reinsurance programs, which is the insurance that insurance companies buy on themselves,
right,
maintain a certain financial stability, their ability to pay a large amount of claims at once if we have a disaster. Those reinsurance costs went up 50 and 70%. So you and I are at the bottom of this mountain when it comes to trickle-down costs on insurance. So if a carrier absorbs more costs for their insurance, who pays for that? You and I do as the policyholders. If their profitability goes down and their losses go up, we're cooling our risk with people. We might not be having losses, but, you know, a lot of our friends and family are. And so, you know, unfortunately, we're pulling that risk. And so that's what ends up happening is that you just got all these factors that have slammed together where carriers have had to make huge movements in rate in order to, you know, attain some type of profitability. and really pump the brakes on what they're writing. So we're in the midst of this hard market. If there's a silver lining in this, I mean, this is the third hard market that I've seen in my 18 years. This is the hardest one for sure, but it almost always ends up coming out on the other side with a soft market.
Right.
So economic factors will change. You'll start to see some things loosen up and soften. They'll tell you though.
What is it? What are the triggers? Like, what are some things that you see in your
everything that we're seeing right now basically says that the market will start to soften at the end of 2024.
But yeah.
So what happens in November of 2024?
The election.
You got an election, right?
Yep.
So just kind of like you see gas prices go down pre-election time,
Do you think that it's going to matter at the end of 2024? It doesn't matter what party takes control or who ends up in office. The first 2 years will be soft.
Theoretically, yes, that's what should happen.
Yeah.
You can see statistically that's what's happened in the past. Obviously, they're not going to put this out there on media, but the thought is that if you get, an administration that's more business friendly, that will help. Sure. That'll help carriers go, okay, we at least have 4 years of this.
Right. We got 3, or 2.
Right.
If the House doesn't, they win the House and
exactly.
They're trying
to get
to
these checks and balances.
Correct.
Always end up, you correct one way, then you correct.
Seems like we're impeach friendly now.
It's true. That's the absolute truth.
Yeah.
But there's an ebb and a flow to every market. I've seen it before. So, this won't last forever.
Sure.
We all feel the pain at like the worst time possible. I mean, everything else is more expensive right now too.
Yep.
And so, we get those calls. I mean, we spend about half our day, remarketing our own book of business, because we do have carriers that we can shift our clients to, but we are also counseling clients like, look, understand what you're giving up. We're seeing some bad actors, out there in the market right now. The difference between, rates is not as vast as it used to be. Everybody's come so close to center on rates that unfortunately a lot of insurance agents, I call myself an insurance professional, a lot of insurance agents are cheating to win, right? So they're not having good coverage discussions. They're relying on their clients' ignorance.
So what you're saying is they're selling the price versus maybe the coverage or deductible is stuff like that.
Yeah,
we hide that, and then when an event happens, then you may have saved $20 a month, but here's a $5,000 deductible, and had you covered yourself better, yes, the pain would have been a little bit more month to month, but you got $1,000 or $2,500 or whatever.
Exactly. Just shifting. Ultimately, they shift it, onto the back of the consumers, and people just don't really realize what they're giving up for a little bit of money, right? Like have a couple of less Starbucks,
right?
And have the better protection, especially when it comes to your home, which is going to be most people's most valuable possession,
right?
Like insurance is not a great place, to cut expense when it comes to your home, right? There's better ways to do that. There's other ways to save. But they're just relying on people not, realizing that deductible is 2% or that it has a roof schedule where it doesn't pay full replacement costs on the roof anymore. And so, the average claim frequency in Texas for wind and hail is every 6.7 years. Wow. So, the way we equate that in a lot of cases is, okay, like how much is that saving you annually in your policy? And then what's the difference in your deductible? How many years do you have to go without a claim for that to make sense? Because yes, it saves you money this year and maybe for the next 4 or 5 years. But if you have to make that claim in 6 or 7 years, did it end up actually saving you any money? And the answer in most cases is no. So when we can get it, because some carriers are just going, hey, 2% wind hail, that's our minimum here in the hail belt of North Texas. They're just saying, hey, look, that's our minimum. But if it's available, we're quoting that 1% deductible. I mean, I remember, when my dad was writing $500 deductibles, like that was common, back in the day. And I'm like, yeah, I haven't seen a flat.
Well, you have a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and even that we're seeing like people are going to $1,000 deductible. But, that's another thing is the median repair cost on an auto claim is like 800% of what it was pre-COVID. So you look at 2019 to 2023 in a 4-year period, that median repair cost on an auto claim is like 800% of what it was. And most of that Obviously, labor and material goes into it, but most of that is the technology in our vehicles, right? Like it's made us safer, but now you can't have a fender bender anymore. Right. And go down to AutoZone and buy a bumper or whatever, right? Like, now there's cameras and sensors, all these other things. I'm going to tell a little story on my wife.
Yeah, sure.
Real quick, right? So this kind of gives you some relativity to the market. So she backs out of the garage. She hangs the mirror on the side of the garage, right? So it's broken. I kind of piece it all back together as best I can, but she can't even ride it through a car wash. So, well, what does this cost to get it fixed? Let's weigh it against our deductible. Do we even want to make a claim? Sure. And so she takes it to the shop, and because of the technology in that mirror, it's a $1,300 mirror. She hung the mirror on the garage wall. It's $1,300.
Right.
Like, that's insanity to me when I think about that. And the guy's like, hey, look, just be glad she didn't scrape the paint.
Right.
It's on the outside of it. If she'd have hit the paint, it's like another certain amount of paint hours and those kind of things, and it's like $1,800 to do that mirror. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's kind of where we're at. When you think about those things.
Yeah, I have a buddy of mine that has a diesel truck, and he's having to get some repairs done, and just to get it, compliant. I don't know a lot about diesels, but I know that you have to get the engine charged up a certain amount every so often, and then they found some other things, $10,000.
Yeah,
it's like you can't do it. I mean, people can't do that.
Now, it almost makes you sick to think about it, and then to think about like, okay, if you decide like, hey, you can pay your car off. A lot of people weigh right now, do I drop the comprehensive collision coverage or the OTC and the collision coverage to save some bucks? But if anybody shopped for even a used car in the last few years, like you realize like it's expensive to go replace your ride.
Yeah.
So unless you just have, the financial means or the savings to go pay cash for something, it is still nice in most cases. You look at the value of the vehicle and go, okay, here's what you're paying to cover it. For full coverage, cover the value of the vehicle with comp and collision and then weigh that against the value of the vehicle. It still makes sense in a lot of cases, even if the vehicle's 10 years old, you had it paid off, whatever it might be, you got to make that decision. It still makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider what repair costs are.
Yeah. Are there any policies that people often don't know about, or they're like things that through your experience, you've recognized as possibly, obviously we know the basics are the vehicle, the car, but umbrella coverages, I'm sure, big one. It's that a lot of people don't think about.
And flood were going to be the two that I was going to mention.
Okay.
Yeah. And really because, in the umbrella scenario, when you have an auto and a home policy, and whatever, you might have investment properties or some of those fun toys, the jet ski and the boat and that kind of thing, that umbrella just it basically gives you that overlying layer of liability protection at $1 million or plus, above your underlying limits. So if those underlying limits are exhausted in a significant incident, now you have, this umbrella policy that you can go to. And I hear the horror stories. Like let's say you have an auto accident with a doctor, and now let's say a surgeon and his hands are, damaged in that auto accident. You can't work, or he can no longer operate. That loss of income. If you're out here carrying state minimum liability limits in Texas, that's $30,000 of bodily injury per person. I mean, the loss of future earnings alone is going to be, 100 times that.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's where like an umbrella policy can be very beneficial. So it's just about having that discussion with clients, to make sure that, hey, like me, I've got a pool. We have company more often now than we ever did. Our kids' friends come over and swim.
Yeah.
What if something happens in the pool? Yeah. What if something happens to one of those kids? Knowing that if my $500,000 of underlying, home insurance liability is exhausted, that I have that, extra $1 million plus of liability protection, especially for somebody who's in insurance, who people are going to assume, well, he must be well insured. Well, then I better be. And people will tell me all the time, like, look, why do I need $1 million umbrella? I'm not a millionaire. I say, look, you don't have to be a millionaire to get sued like you are one.
Shit, exactly.
Right? And the only way I can protect you, is with having the appropriate liability coverage, because the insurance company real quickly will write policy limits and they will wash their hands and walk away. Mm-hmm. But if you got that umbrella, now they got some skin in the game here where, hey, it's, and the defense cost is always incumbent upon your carrier. People think that $1 million also has to cover legal fees. No, those legal fees are outside of those limitations. And that defense cost is incumbent upon your carrier. So it's really nice to have that liability protection, above those policies, especially when we have some waves.
Yeah.
Flood insurance is a good one too, by the way, because a lot of people assume if you're not in a high hazard flood zone or moderate to high hazard flood zone, that you don't need it. I always, like, if I do a seminar or something, I'll say, okay, raise your hand if you're in a flood zone. And most people won't raise their hand because they're not in a flood zone that requires them to purchase flood insurance.
Right.
But we all live in a flood zone. It's just that most of us live in flood zone X that doesn't require mandatory purchase of flood insurance.
100-year, 150.
There it is, right? And if you got a loan on the home and you're in a moderate to high hazard area, you got to buy it, right? And so, but what they don't realize is even in preferred zone X, which most of us live in, that's almost a third of all flood claims happen in flood zone X, right? And people just don't realize that it can happen. You ask those people in Houston, during Hurricane Harvey, that were not in a flood zone, in a moderate to high hazard flood zone, but their homes flooded in Harvey, if they wish they had that flood insurance. So we at least have to have the discussion, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing with life insurance. Dad always said, look, if you want to have the worst feeling in the world, have a recent widow come walk into your office and ask you if their husband had life insurance, and you can't in good conscience say that you ever talked about it. Right. So you at least have to have the discussion. You can't lead, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink, right? But if you never had the discussion, what a terrible feeling that would be to have somebody come in and say, please tell me you had some life insurance. So please tell me that she had some life insurance. So to me, not to be a drag, but that would be a terrible feeling, to have somebody come in and I never had the discussion. So it's just kind of a part of our process.
Sure. Well, I'm going to feel better.
Yeah.
Opening this.
Hey, this is one I've been looking for.
Yeah. So this is Tequila Ocho.
Yeah.
It's finished in Widow Jane barrel. I know we're drinking whiskey and bourbon.
Right.
We're drinking tequila after that. So that's kind of a little bit of a faux pas, but it is finished in bourbon cask. So
I think it counts.
Yeah, absolutely. A limited edition. I thought this would be a good one to open for you because I know you've been getting into tequila a little bit more.
Yeah. So that Stock the Bar party, I got a couple of good bottles of tequila, and then I realized that Herradura is not necessarily where it's at.
It's this one is additive free, which is a big thing in the tequila market right now. And with it being finished in Widow Jane, I think you'll find a crispness to it.
Christmas, not a Christmas. I was like, oh, it's gonna taste like that. I believe that's all gin.
Yeah, and it's gonna be good. What were we talked a lot of policies and stuff like that. What were the first couple days and weeks and months at your new agency? What was that like? It had to feel like some days were exhilarating. Some days were because when you're a captive carrier, I'm assuming that it's just like a machine. You're just making calls and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And you got people calling you. You're making calls, and then you have referrals.
You can rely on the name on the
Exactly. And so here you are. You're in a different stage of things. You're selling a product that's not familiar to East Texas and Tyler.
Yeah,
and
for sure,
probably doing some door knocking and probably a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
Mortgage professional, like we said, and stuff like that. So love me through that. I mean, I kind of filled in some blanks, but
yeah,
I bet you there was a lot of other.
Dude, I'll tell you, it was like being on an island.
Yeah,
really. I mean, because it was just me. I mean, that was Dad's retirement, that farmer's agency, and so he said, look, you can't take anybody with you, right? That's my retirement, and so for me, I knew I had to jump with both feet in and try and get out there and hustle business, but So what I did was I wanted to keep my expenses low, so I located inside of Keller Williams Realty in Tyler. And the team lead at that time gave me a one-room office, which was more room than I even needed.
Right.
But it was $150 a month, and the power bill and the phone was included.
Wow, nice.
And the internet too. I mean, so I'm like, man, I thought about keeping your overhead low, right, and keeping your expenses down. So this is a good story. I moved into that office in January. And of course, nobody knows what the heck Goosehead is. So they have a table set up right outside the door because their meeting room is right across the hall from my office, which I thought was a super big advantage. And so I put some flyers out, just kind of talking about who Goosehead was and how we're different.
Yeah.
Put that flyer out on that table outside the door. And I'm sitting in the office and I'm like, going through, a client list, and I'm making phone calls, and I'm sitting there in a quiet moment, and these two folks come down the hallway, and it's two realtors, come down the hallway, and I hear them stop and pick up the flyer, and they're like, golly, why would you need that many carriers? And they throw the flyers back on the table. And I was like, oh man, that's a bad sign. I got to get out and tell this story, right?
Right.
And then the next day they had a pizza party, hosted by another insurance agent. Well, I was out of the office right outside my door in that meeting space. And I was like, I'm in trouble. Like, if I rely on this office for business, my doors are going to be shut very, very soon. And so that was, everything happens for a reason. That was the spark I needed. I was like, okay, I got to get out. I got to beat the street. And so I went out, I told the story, I darkened all the doors, tried to sell on the point of difference, but really kind of where I started to see some success was I said, look, just give me your toughest filing. Like, give me the one where like insurance is absolutely blowing the deal. These are realtors and mortgage professionals, right? And it's like, hey, if people are close on debt to income ratio, if the insurance is really high, it throws off their ratios, it throws off their numbers, they can't afford to buy the house.
Yeah, what a start.
Like, hey, get on your toughest file, right? And so they were like, all right, take this. And I'd go right back to the office, I'd knock that thing out, and I'd call them, and it'd be like, hey, I'm $1,000 less. You can just save this deal. And so it's like, okay, I'm like, cool. Like, and then so like, tell your greater than 100%. Like, you should try and spider network out from that. Okay, cool. Mortgage professional A, who are your top realtors? Let me get a lunch with them, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, okay, so I start seeing some success, but what I realized real quickly is I'm a firefighter. I'm literally just putting out tough files.
Right.
And there's a lot of work that goes into putting out those tough files, right? And it's not, honestly, sometimes it's not the best business in the world. And so I'm like, hey, do you think I'm really good? So then after I start like coaching your referral partners, I'm like, hey, you think I'm really good on the tough deals? You should see how good I am on new construction, right? The thing that's just really low risk and super good price. But it was 100% like being on an island. It was just me for like a year and a half before I brought on my first team member. And, now there's 7 of us.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I'm either a genius or an idiot. I hired 3.
A little bit of both.
I might be. Jury's out, like 3 new people in the midst of this hard market.
Yeah.
So double, the size of our agency. But my thought on it is like, now is the time where you establish a good process, where you ingrain good habits, and form the right approach on how to do this business the right way. Because if there's anything I can say about my dad is that, he always did business the right way. It was always with customer first, protection focus. And so I'm like, if I can teach people how to sell in this market, and be the right kind of agent, when the skies open up and the market's soft, and they're going to be rainmakers.
Right. Do you think that your business model is there's an advantage for this type of market with your business model?
Yeah. One, when a carrier decides that they've had enough and they just want to pump the brakes on new business, that you have something to ship to.
Sure.
We had one carrier that we worked with that, basically just said they just started kind of geo-targeting different zip codes all over Texas. It wasn't just a East Texas thing. And just geo-targeted and said, we have too much density, too many policies in this area. The storm comes through or a disaster happens, we're going to be overexposed in this area. So we just don't want any business here. And so they start non-renewing. Well, it's nice to be able to go, hey, yeah, they don't want your business anymore, but I have 4 other carriers that do.
That's awesome.
Because it really seems like, and less so right now, but, every carrier goes through that rate cycle, whether it's a hard or a soft market. So when one carrier wants to jump off the ship, there's always another carrier who's like, get on the boat, And so it's just nice to have, it's nice to have those options. It's nice to have a lot of ships in the harbor.
Right. So we talked about captive agencies. Where do you and your dad had the foresight to say, hey, look, as technology expands, because I think that's your bread and butter is let me utilize my 80 carriers to your advantage. So that way we know we can partner you best with, the best fit, which you may not even like the 2 policies that were presented to me were carriers I hadn't even heard of.
Right.
It's not that they're bad.
Nope.
They're great carriers, and I did my research on them. But we're coming into a time period, a generation where people are more educated through the internet. They've used different companies to help them save money, but get more out of it.
Right.
And so, where do you see captive agencies? What you guys were kind of seeing them as where they were going to be boxed in a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
And I know a number of my friends that went to college, got their degree, bought a book of business, and I was presented a couple agencies. I didn't tell you that prior to this, but I couldn't see a path because there was limitations.
Right. Yeah, and I think for me, honestly, having the portfolio that we have is a distinct advantage, but really taking some of these carriers out of the equation is not necessarily a bad thing. It forces other carriers, to look at things in a different perspective. Honestly, what has ended up happening with a lot of captive carriers, like I have Allstate in my portfolio.
Right. They just fall under your,
there is. So like they have a exclusive agency channel where it's like the Allstate storefront, but then like they have an independent agency channel with Allstate as well. So like I'm writing Allstate as a part of this robust portfolio, while the guy down the street that has the Allstate sign on his building just has Allstate. And so like, if I'm that exclusive agent, I'm like, man, I'm having to compete against myself, with an independent agency.
Yeah.
But Allstate wasn't going to be outdone on that. I mean, even Farmers gotten into that stratosphere. They purchased the MetLife, auto and home book of business. So it's now written under Foremost Signature, which was a Farmer subsidiary that we had when, we were in Dad's agency. So, a lot of these Nationwide was exclusive to Nationwide agents for a long time, but even they started to open it up to independent agencies. And then eventually what happened with them is they just went fully independent. Now they're just an independent carrier like a Safeco or a Travelers or somebody like that. And it's just available to all independent agents, no more exclusive. I honestly see that being the case with a lot of those. I think the big domino that'll be the last of all, if it ever does, is State Farm. I mean, State Farm is the largest carrier in the U.S. I mean, in Texas alone, they have 1.3 million policyholders. But I can tell you that for the captives, it's an interesting time because in this market, being the biggest is not the best.
Right.
Like you have the most exposure. You have to make the biggest changes.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, it seems like the changes that are being made, again, are on the back of the consumer.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting. It's just an interesting time
to
be in the business. But I think it gives us the ability to really establish a point of difference and say, hey, look, it doesn't make a lot of sense just to put all your eggs in one basket. The most frustrating part for people when they shop insurance is having to go find a new person to have a relationship with.
Right.
But the advantage here is that you and I can have a relationship as client and insurance advisor while having access. You have access to this portfolio of carriers to choose from so that you and I can have that relationship over the long term while maintaining some semblance of rate stability.
Yeah. Almost like an investment firm.
Yeah.
In some way.
100%.
Yeah.
Right? Except, we're not just going to sell you that one product, and we tell our realtor partners, like, you wouldn't show somebody one house.
Right.
If you're a mortgage broker, you're not going to, just look at one loan. Look at all the options. And then you're going to advise your client.
Yeah.
But you got to do it the right way. You got to do it from an educational standpoint. Educated client is a happy client. They know what they bought. They know what's covered and what's not.
Yeah. Cool.
Really good.
Yeah. You like it?
Yeah. I'm like, okay. Yep. I mean, I'm just going to say this though, because I'm new to whiskey, right? I mean, this is just over the last 3-4 years. So I'm new to whiskey and I finally able to start collecting some bottles. I'm really thrilled that we have such great, admins and people that have a better sense of taste than I do, in the East Texas Whiskey Club.
Yeah.
So I'm getting these club picks. Everything's amazing. And I'm like, man, it's so good. And now you guys are getting into tequila.
Yes.
And I'm just starting to get some traction on whiskey. So
yeah,
when we start talking about a portfolio and investment, right? Like you got to diversify.
Yeah.
Like now I'm diversified, but I'm like, I was the guy that was like thought Crown and Coke or Crown and Sugar and like hung the moon.
Yeah, everybody starts somewhere, matters,
right?
And then you're drinking Bud Light, Miller Lite, Michelob,
and then the first IPA.
And
They're like,
wait, that's how I got that's where I started.
Okay,
so I got a craft beer. I got into craft beer. I had a friend that was big time in the craft beer, and he got me into it and tasting different things, mostly Texas products. Because we're blessed with a lot of breweries.
Yeah,
and 2 here in town,
right?
Tyler,
and
one in Canton, who I'm going to have him on here pretty brewing queue. I don't know how you know. Oh yeah, they're
barbecue there too.
Yes. Yeah, so they're at the KOA in Canton. So
all right,
he's gonna be on it. That'd be awesome. It's in a couple episodes.
Cool.
So that'll be a good one to tune in too. And so I'm doing that, and then a friend of mine for a milestone birthday bought me a bottle of Jack Daniel's Sinatra. Okay, I don't know if you've ever had that, but it's I drink a lot of Jack Daniels, more than I care to share. But
we all cut our teeth.
Yes, and I loved it. I could drink a lot of it. And I have an uncle who I'm thinking about tonight, who definitely he was my segue into Jack Daniels. But I get this bottle of Sinatra, I crack it, and it's like nothing I've ever tasted. It was like craft bourbon whiskey, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that something could taste this good by itself.
Right.
And so that causes me to go to the liquor store and look around. Now, I'm not looking, that bottle's a $120 bottle, and thankfully I have a good friend that bought that for me. But I'm looking at things that I just couldn't pass it up.
Yeah.
And it gets me rolling. Then I start meeting people. I go to the Bourbon Society, which we have here, thankfully. A great group of people.
Yeah.
And meet some people and then get hooked up with Daniel Ross, who he's mentored a lot of people in this area. And so I remember a ton of text messages that I've looked at and been like, oh, I'm shameful for even saying that this product is so good. And knowing his history and knowing how well he's into the business, or how long he's been involved with whiskey and picks and stuff like that, I'm just like shaking my head. But I remember like I got real motivated to want this one barrel because my first passion, my first love was E.H. Taylor.
Yeah.
That's like a great pour.
Yeah, so good.
And back whenever I first got started, this was 6 years ago, like it was on the shelf. Like it's no big deal, not like today.
Yeah.
And so I remember drinking it, especially in the fall. I just loved, it was a small batch, it's fine. It had like a cinnamon like flavor to me, has a rye strand in it. It's just so good. And so I had a guy who I went to high school with that is a big E.H. Taylor fan, and him and I were messaging one day. He's like, man, you should see if you can get a barrel of Tumbling Dice. And it's very similar. So I got to taste this first. So I find some connections and get the Tumbling Dice because they weren't distributed to Texas at the time. And I tasted with a couple of my guys that are living in the neighborhood, and we're all just flabbergasted at how good it is. It's a high rye, 36% rye, but it's got a deep, like caramel, like chocolatey flavor to it at the end. So we're all just doing it on. Of course, we're still new to bourbon itself. So I'm like, oh, I got it. So at the time, the ad in, I'm reaching out, hey, we need to get the, da-da-da. And they're like, go get it. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that.
Right.
So I started trying to connect some dots, and next thing you know, the samples come in. Oh my God, Collin.
Yeah.
The funniest picture, I think and I send it like every couple of months or twice a year, maybe comes up because, so I get the samples in and I don't know what to expect. Okay. So first set of samples come in and I'm excited. And I tell my wife, like, hey, I'm having guys over. They're driving in from Tyler to Lindale. It's a long drive. We need to feed them, this, that, and the other. So we've got this big board and just, salami and prosciutto and crackers. And it's like this, probably the best. And we'd only done like maybe 3 picks. We used to taste the whiskey,
right.
Maybe 4. Somewhere in that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
3.
Is this after the The Jenny's bourbon?
Yeah, it's right after.
Okay.
Yeah, so the Cabin releases, COVID.
Yes.
And then I think there may have been one or two more others. And so it's fairly infant aisle, but they come over and they're like, oh my God, so they the deal. And I had a pretty decent collection at that time, funded mostly by Well 12.
That you really came strong.
Oh yeah, I've got a personality that comes that way, and not only that, but I had a mostly an adult child, just one child, so I had a lot of time to spend on other activities.
Sure.
And so they come over. Oh yeah, it's great. I bring the samples out, and they're like, "What in the world is this?" They're in mason jars, like flat mason jars that were not sealed, metal tops. I mean,
oh yeah.
So we pour them, and they're ridiculously horrible. And I feel horrible about it. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, guys, because I had hyped it up.
Right.
This is my first opportunity, and luckily we got a second chance, and we got the first Tumbling Dice to Cadillac.
Okay.
Tumbling Dice was my first barrel to help contribute to the Whiskey Club, and there's been quite a few more, and not all credit goes to me. A lot of other players were in it, especially when it comes to distribution, access, and connecting the dots. Shannon Hood's been very intricate. Daniel's been very intricate. Jay Lane has too, because a lot of people don't know how much he chases. He really does a lot for the Whiskey Club as far as barrel hunting. Him and I, and there's been a couple of little key players that have been very involved in doing it. And so, and travel places. We've got a barrel coming up that a couple of people in our club travel to Vegas to go do.
Yeah.
So you're like dropping everything.
Right.
I'm taking days off of work.
Yeah.
And everybody makes it sound so glamorous to go.
Oh, I know.
Like sample, and not only that, but we're kind of getting off the rails. We're not talking about insurance anymore.
Oh, it's good.
They're in my channel now.
Oh, this is great. So I could ask you a question. And this little question I was going to ask was like your start in bourbon. So like this.
Yeah. So you let's say for the second, you and I get picked to go do this pick in Vegas. And so now we're in Vegas. We got to get a hotel. We got to pay for a flight. Maybe we use points, this, that, and the other. Okay. We meet the rep. He maybe takes us out to lunch or whatever. That's great. Right. Yeah. And then we do the sampling. Well, obviously just took you to lunch and maybe taking to a show tonight. There's a pressure on you to pick something.
Oh,
right?
for sure.
And so, and it may not just be that in this arena. Let's just say it's in Memphis and you're in Blue Note, or let's say you get shipped samples, let's say a bunch of barrels, 4 or 5 barrels, and it's a startup distillery and you're part of their startup, or
they're not offering these barrels to multiple people at once.
That's right. Or like ASW, who when we did the Joker pick, they didn't distribute in Texas at that time, and our pick helped get them into Texas. And since then, they weren't even in Kentucky. And now, due to the fact I knew a couple people,
right,
I just put them in together.
Yep.
Didn't expect anything.
Yeah.
And now they're in Kentucky. And as kind of, they kick me a bottle or two every now and again and some releases, and I appreciate them for that. They don't have to do it, but I definitely am a big advocate for them, because not only do they are they a great product, but they recognize effort. They somebody doing things, and that's my passion.
Yeah.
My passion is getting with distributors, getting with the people behind the scenes, the sales people, the distillers. These are people that are really good at production.
Yep.
And they're not so good at getting it to a group or getting into the market. Getting into the market. And from their point of view, it's one barrel.
Right.
This is a lot of work for one barrel. You're telling me what you don't like, and you're telling me you want more samples, or you're telling me I have to hold these 3 barrels that I could be releasing to the market.
Right.
And I'm holding for you,
exactly,
waiting for your feedback. So as time goes on, I become more and more, sensitive to those things. But at the same token, I understand that we have a market to serve.
Right.
Right. And so when 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 I'm part of a pick, whether it's a barrel that I've gotten together like samples for, or I'm selected as a picker, it's fun. There's no doubt about it. Okay, it's fun for sure. Okay, but there's a certain amount of pressure that's also involved because, I mean, as you know, or I don't know if you know or not, but the yield on these things are 180 to 250, sometimes more than that. Okay, multiply that by how much you pay for it.
Right.
So let's say the average release for these system whiskey clubs $80.
Yeah.
80 times 200, 16 grand.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
So your
somebody's got to pay for that.
Well, true.
Yeah.
We all do. Right. As a group, we can't make any money. We can't profit from these releases. We're not distributors.
The people don't realize what goes into.
Right. Well, the fun part is sample. There's no doubt about it. But once the sampling's done, the seriousness starts because let's just say, for the sake of saying, there's 4 of us, okay? And they send us 100 milliliters, okay? And you get 25 milliliters. 4 of us all get 25 milliliters, okay? Once the sampling's done, we all get 25 milliliters of maybe 3 barrels. Now you're making a $16,000 decision. And if you're part of the pick team, you're also representing yourself and the club in a release. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. There's been plenty of times where I've left a sampling going, I don't know if we made the right decision, or I think, well, a lot of times we'll say, look, sleep on it. You know, we'll get votes in tomorrow or whatever. But a lot of times the whiskey changes because the distiller puts the barrel online, and 3 months later or a month later or 2 months later, been in the barrel, it's been in maybe a different warehouse, whatever. There's a lot of factors. Then they're dumping. It's just, and then the distribution side, I don't even want to get involved in. That's just
it's a much longer discussion.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite one was when we were trying to get the fiddler to East Texas, and remember we had the ice storm. Right. We had the ice storm then, so it was supposed to be here at, or maybe it was the Christmas fiddler, one of the two. And it was supposed to be in at the beginning of December, and it comes in like the week before Christmas. So it's like the Christmas miracle. Yeah. But we didn't think we were going to get it, and we're like trying to pull people. Like, who do you work for? DHL? Okay, that's the carrier. Let's, could you pull some strings? And I remember that one in particular. No, it was the fiddler. So it leaves Atlanta, it goes to Tennessee, and then it goes to Alabama, and then it goes to Mississippi. And then it goes back up to like Arkansas, and then it goes over to like New Mexico. It's like going everywhere. And
for where you
right. And I remember updating the admin team, which I'm not. I don't want to be an admin because those guys do a great job.
Super.
And I like to just pick barrels. Yeah. And then if they make a judgment call like, hey, we're not going to do that, then I'm good. Yeah. Like I like working with the barrel team. The barrel stuff, and they do that part, and I have a lot of admiration for those folks that admin, that club, because they do a great job.
For sure. You ever pick based on what they feel like the general population of the club is going to enjoy? Because like I'm over here going like, hey, obviously everybody on the admin team and everybody that's helping pick barrels, like their tastes are more refined than probably the majority of their group. So do you guys ever go like, hey, this is going to be more palatable to the masses than what necessarily we might choose for ourselves?
So that is the age-old question at almost every barrel pick.
Here it is.
And I think there are, I'm not going to name names, but there are some admins to me that have really, really good palates. And there are some people that are not admins that have been part of my pick team, or not mine, but I mean, the barrels that I've been involved in or gotten samples for, or that the admins have allowed me, hey, I like this person to be on the team, or that person, that I have a strong feeling about their palate. And it's one thing to have a really refined palate, but it's also another thing to be able to speak up about it. Because if you say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, maybe you could be perceived the wrong way.
Right.
And there may be some notion that maybe, well, wait a minute, I'll taste that. And so maybe, but I mean, I have strong feeling about a lot of people. There are a good amount of people in our area that have done enough barrel picks and certain ones really have a conviction about what they taste, and they have a trust and faith, and I appreciate that. Because there are a lot of times that I don't taste it. But
willing to speak up.
Correct, yes. And so I think almost now it's not been that way for all of them. Like the Old Forester Old Blue, everybody was like,
that's the one.
This is the one.
Yeah.
It's the single best sample I've ever tasted at any of the barrel picks I've ever done. It was leaps and bounds. But that is the number one question that you just asked was, we have 3 samples. 2 of them are very unique. One of them is like safe.
Yep.
Okay.
Safe
pick. And this one, is a crowd pleaser. These 2 are very unique. And so I think that part of my really strong admiration for the admins and the people that are decision makers on these picks is that they normally go with the unique picks.
Right.
And the reason why is they have conviction about the ability of the group.
Yes.
And so when everything's leveled out, typically the crowd pleaser is the one that's ruled out. And because it's a barrel pick for a reason.
Yeah.
And if I want a shelf offering, then I get the shelf off.
Go on down the street.
Right. And there's been plenty of crowd pleasers that I would have said 100 comments would have been like, this is amazing. And then one example of that is doorknob. I don't know if you ever had a chance. It's not for everybody.
Right.
But for people that get it, they love it.
Right.
Drank it very quickly. They want more.
I was going to say, it wasn't a full-size bob.
Right. Well, it had full-size. We had Haas.
That was my mistake.
Right.
Yeah. So I should have trusted.
Sure.
I should have trusted the palate in the end.
It was such a unique pour, and I can tell you that it turned out. A lot of times the barrel turns out better than what I remember, because you taste it and 2 months later, now you tasted a quarter of a liter.
Right.
And then the barrel comes out and you're like, holy crap, why didn't I get 6 of these? Or, if it's available, because we have a great group of 1,000 people that trust the admin's palates. And hopefully this story kind of helps with that. Because
me too.
That's the one admiration I have for those folks.
I was going to say, I don't think people realize how fortunate they are. If you're into whiskey, how great it is to have that group here locally.
Yep.
I almost don't want to advertise it too much. There are some where it's y'all are going to want this one. It's really good. And then it goes quick. You better set your timer on the alarm on your phone.
Yep.
For 5 minutes to midnight here, because you ain't getting that bottle.
Right.
You're not Johnny on the spot.
And there's a lot of barrels coming this way. Oh yeah, there's exclusive barrels that
I love Daniel, because he'll tell you, save your lunch money.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Save your lunch money.
Yep. You're gonna definitely want to save it, because there's gonna be some really exclusive opportunities. And then I personally have a couple barrels that are in the fire.
Okay.
That are going to be, big time winners.
Okay.
With the group, and
this is so
it's
insider info.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into too much detail. Daniel actually listed out that we have another fiddler that is possible. We don't know what the time frame is, because we've got a lot going on. We've got a Buffalo Trace coming.
Yeah.
So that's
interesting to me. So. My parents drank Weller when I was growing up.
Yep.
It was nothing special.
Yep.
Right? It was cheap. And now it's so hard to find.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it's just interesting. I'm sure Buffalo Trace once upon a time was hey, that's not a big deal. But you don't realize what all originates out of that distillery.
Right.
That's the most amazing part to me, is to see all the different things that come from that distillery that aren't in Buffalo Trace.
Yeah. Then it's owned by Sazerac.
Right.
And then they have their own products, right? So it may be made by Buffalo Trace, it may not be, All right, so we went off on. I appreciate the answer, because that's in my wheelhouse. So you got me stoked.
100%. That was. We talked a little bit about it before we came on.
There's a lot of back story about that, and
you must need to have appreciation.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of go getters in the club that want to learn how to do things, and I've been lucky on my first barrel. They just said, go get it. So I learned a lot through that. And
even with the terrible samples.
Yeah, I mean,
but the beautiful separation you had.
The second, so the funny story is the second sample we sampled at Blake Baumgartner's house. It was like 100 degrees outside. So we're sampling like 120 proof bourbon, and we had fans all over us. But it was a great. I mean, it's like, you know, that's what you live for when you're hunting barrels and you're getting samples and you're working with. Those are stories you love, and then the part that really gets to me is when the bottles hit, and then you get the feedback.
Yeah,
and so you see somebody enjoying it in their kitchen with a friend or family member or whatever, and they're like, I shared this with my uncle, and he said it was the best whiskey he's ever had. You know, and that's the part that's like, that's all the payment I need. You know, I don't need anything else. I don't, you know, none of the admins get paid. I don't get paid to go chase barrels. I just love bringing different, unique offerings to the
like, I mean, honestly, like for me, you know, bourbon is only as good as the company.
Absolutely.
Right. And so like I scored a bottle of E.H. Taylor small batch.
Yeah.
You know, retail at Christmas time. So New Year's Eve, you know, and you know, my wife's you know, Bailey, and just not super into whiskey, but I bring that to Christmas Eve, and you know, I pour some for like her uncle and her dad, and you know, I'm pouring it neat, you know, like sure, I mean, we don't even have the ice cube in it, and that's not how they drink their whiskey, and they taste this and they are like, oh buddy,
yeah,
but I mean, the H. Taylor small batch, right? Like, and I'm like, okay, like I thought that was really good, and then I tasted the single barrel, and I was like, oh, wait, this is also very, very good. So like, but introducing it to people that, you know, are like, oh wow, like, yeah, this is way better than I expected it to be. So
all right, get a sip or get enough more, because we're gonna get into your wheelhouse.
Yeah,
and another wheelhouse here.
Yeah, this is my favorite wheelhouse.
Yeah, this is, so we'll show what you're pouring here.
Okay.
Josh, you want to use this? Okay. This is Fiddler. We talked about that a little bit. It's made by ASW. We've had this on the show a couple times. Here, you want to take a bottle? And you know, they're one that, man, I just love what's on you, man. Yeah, they do a great job. The only barrel that I have at my house of the barrels that I've like chased or gotten, however you want to use it, is at my house. Is the Fiddler. Yeah. The first Fiddler, Joker. That barrel's at my house because, you know, I worked pretty hard on that one. And I had all the employees sign it, and then I signed it when it arrived. Which is pretty cool. Yeah, I still have it at my house. All right.
Yep.
You've been on a bunch of board of directors. You've been on a bunch of boards.
Yeah.
You're currently on two?
Currently on two.
Okay, so
you're my rule of two, but
yes. All right.
My wife's like, please.
Right. So White House ISD, we'll move that to
not the school board, but the Education Foundation.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I think probably the one that we'll start with, and I've been on another board before, which is A's Away.
Right.
Boys Ranch, Children's Services, Foster and Adoption Services. A's Away is an amazing organization. Just to have a rule, you got to roll off every once in a while. So rolled off in January.
Right.
But you know, really, next step was my first board. So the story I'll tell is that I applied for Leadership Tyler because a part of what they do is introduce you to nonprofits, right? And listen, at this point, you know, where I'm looking at that, like I'm 2 years in. My Goosehead success story is in 3.5 years, I grew a larger book of business than my dad had built in 28 farmers. I mean, they put that on YouTube and they sold a bunch of franchises from it, right? Because it's that choice model and the way I did it, right? And so I felt incredibly blessed by the community. And I was like, how do I give back, right? And I wanted to give back through, you know, nonprofit or board service, right? Volunteering, these kind of things. Like, how do I give back? How do I, other than just to write a check, you know what I mean? Like, how do I get involved? And so I applied for Leadership Tyler. I didn't get selected. But a buddy of mine, like a couple months later, in November, was like, hey, there's this really cool organization. I'm doing some media for them. It's Next Step Community Solutions. They do youth mental health and substance abuse counseling, and they're doing a cold turkey fund. They need sponsors, like I think it's really cool. You should check it out. Do a sponsorship, but come down and, see what it's about. And so I did, and met several of the people, the executive director at the time, and met several of the people that were involved with it. I have a cousin who I was really close to growing up that passed away, from an overdose on pills. And so, really for me, like that was something like mental health, substance abuse, those kind of things. Unfortunately, it takes tragedies in this country for us to pay attention to things having to do with our mental health. And so I think everybody's been really clued into that for a while now. And so I was just like, man, this is something that's close to my heart. It seemed like a really cool organization. And so I wanted to know more about it. They're like, well, listen, we're looking for board members. Let's go to lunch. And so I sat down with them, and they kind of told that story, on how they started, but what their tent poles were, right? So what Next Step Community Solutions does is they provide mental health and substance abuse counseling on school campuses. They have their prevention services as well through their community coalitions. But what's really neat is that they have licensed professional counselors. So it's kind of like two tracks that you go into when you're a counselor. You go kind of educational side, or that mental health, that substance abuse side of it. Mm-hmm. And so school counselors are kind of being tasked with intervening on behalf of the kids that, are struggling with other issues, right? Like the mental health side, and not necessarily, focused on the education side of it. So what Next Step does is we put counselors on school campuses. And I've actually got some stats, and I'll kind of share that about Next Step, and I think it's really neat. But they do it free of charge to the kids and the parents, right? And they do it on school campus, so it's a minimal interruption to the school day.
Right.
But we know, we've been able to calculate that we have saved lives, we've improved attendance, we've improved outcomes. The most disheartening thing for me was to learn how early we needed to intervene. Like we're talking about on the elementary level.
Yeah.
And that was just, I've got my blinders on to the world, so to speak, that we would have to get involved, with kids that young, but it is unfortunate, and it's kind of where we're at as a society. But what we have figured out is that the earlier we intervene on behalf of the child, the better their trajectory is. Yeah. Right. You can improve those outcomes vastly if you can give them the tools to equip to deal with what they're dealing with at home, or out in the world, or at school. So it's just super, super neat. And then the coalition, the prevention part of it is also amazing. It's just an organization that I've been on that board for 8 years. I'm super passionate about it. The sky is the limit. That organization has grown tremendously, but we're barely scratching the surface on that one. There's such a need for it, and nobody's really doing it the exact way that we're doing it. But it's invigorating to me, to be involved with an organization like that, that is really filling this void that we have. And I think, the youth of today are really clued into being open to talking about their mental health,
right?
Which I think is great, right? My parents' generation and even my generation, it's just not as prolific, talking about how we're feeling and telling our friends that we need help. But one program that Next Step has that I think is super awesome is Sources of Strength. And so what Sources of Strength is that it's a peer-led program. It's different when you and I have a conversation with a kid than it is when their friend has a conversation with them. So it's a peer-led organization where these kids want to get involved. And it just helps them identify and direct, their fellow students and their friends to getting the help and the care that they need.
Right.
We've also got a mental health first aid program. Women's Fund of Smith County has been incredible. They've given us 2 different awards for grants where we were able to be in Smith County and expand these programs with that. Mental health first aid, it teaches those that interact with kids on a regular basis, again, how to identify those that are in need of help and not try and counsel them, but actually direct them to care and how to do that. And I think it's just amazing.
Yeah. Other than the awards, how is the project funded?
Mostly for grants.
Yeah.
The part that, we really need to focus on in growth is community funding. Yeah, because you get grants, you get state funding, right? I mean, I think, unfortunately, again, it takes tragedies in this country for states and federal government to decide to fund things that can help address that. So we do get, that kind of funding. But, things change over time. Like, they could pull, that grant or pull that funding. Yeah. And if you don't have community funding that's a part of that, you can't help fill that void. And so that's the part that right now, with that particular organization that I'm really passionate about is again, kind of like what Goosehead, telling the story. Because I think everybody's hyper aware of it right now, unfortunately, with the things that have happened in our schools and with our kiddos. And to know that there is an organization out there that can serve, an organization that can, again, help change the trajectory for kids. And so kids have been what I've been passionate about. I'm a father of 3. My wife and I have 2 girls. And so anything that has to do with that, like, just absolutely touches my heart.
Sure.
And so Azleway was a natural fit for me. Next Step also has been a very natural fit for me. Can I give some stats?
Yeah, sure.
Next Step. Love it. Pull the phone out.
Love stats.
Like faux pas on a podcast or not. But Brandon Davison is the executive director of Next Step. Really funny guy.
Smith County.
Yeah, it's Smith County, but we're in multiple counties.
Okay.
Yeah, we've grown we get some funding from the Women's Fund of Smith County that's earmarked for Smith County. But we're all over at this point. I think
is it? Let me just make sure that I understand.
Sure.
Is it? And I'm just liking into it. Is it similar to someone maybe going into a jail and having a group of guys that they give testimony to? Is it similar to that?
In some ways, it's not necessarily religion based.
No. But I mean, is there one person that comes into the school?
Yes.
And then the counselor says, I've got these
100%
that I need. Yeah. I've identified
what to teach.
And that person that goes in there, that's the subject matter expert.
Yes.
In telling
that.
And then meanwhile, while they're there, they identify other peer leaders or that maybe want to step forward and that want to take on that.
Yeah.
Say straight the core forces.
Yeah.
Yes. And so they're doing that. So they're holding a couple different torches and all they're there. And then maybe they don't do it just at that place. They go to other schools. Yeah, we're just working with counselors.
Yes. What's really neat is that, yes, that counselor establishes a relationship with that school and with the student body of that school.
Right.
And so what's really cool is seeing where what happens is that when a kid gets care and that kid improves, that kid becomes a mouthpiece.
Right.
That kiddo's obviously going to tell their patrons, especially the ones that they know that share some of their struggles.
Right.
Hey, you need to go talk to someone.
Right.
Like, they really helped me. They gave me some tools. They gave me some coping things like that really are valuable.
Right.
For me. And so,
sorry, I know that.
No, it's great.
I just want to make sure that people knew, like, the breakdown. That's what it sounded like to be. I just want to make sure.
Absolutely. And they are in probation.
And that's awesome as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. So this school year, 1,000 school-age students with individual counseling at 60 school campuses.
Wow.
Suicide prevention on 40 campuses, impacting 15,000 6 to 12th graders. 200 students through juvenile probation and alternative school programs. 60 youth that participate in the Youth Yoga Lab, which is a new program that we've got.
Yeah.
That we're able to onboard. Speaking of that, because I know you kind of talked about, hey, I can drop some events that are coming up.
Yeah, sure.
Rooftop yoga. So Next Step's partnering with Be Free Yoga to host a free community yoga event. This is September 29th.
Okay.
6:30 p.m. on the roof of the parking garage downtown Tyler.
Oh, sweet.
Yep. So hopefully the weather's cool.
Yeah,
for that, right? DEA take back. So that's another thing that we've done is we had like the shop program at different schools build these boxes.
Yeah.
And we put them, at police departments and pharmacies and things like that, where people, instead of, when you're done with the medication, especially like a narcotic or something like that, this is where kids are finding their drugs, right? In a lot of cases. And so it becomes kind of a gateway for them. It's leaving it in your medicine cabinet. Now we're providing parents,
walk in the alley, fish in the alley.
yeah, a place to go deposit that. So the DEA Take Back, that's on October 28th, 10 to 2, various locations.
Okay.
ETXRX.com has those locations.
Okay.
But they're partnering with law enforcement in 9 counties on that. And they're going to collect and destroy unused, unwanted prescription drugs. Last year, we collected over 2,000 pounds of prescription drugs in those drop boxes. It's an incredible amount. Hell, I mean, think about how many pill weighs, right? So like 2,000 pounds of drugs off the street, prescription drugs off the street that are now no longer at somebody's fingertips in the medicine cabinet.
Wow.
I think we all know Tyler Gives is a big thing. That's November 28th all day. You can donate to Next Step to provide mental health services for students in Smith County at tylergives.org.
Yeah, we'll tag a couple.
Yeah,
it was maybe some examples stuff, and maybe tag that your URL for you, so that way when we post the podcast,
that'd be awesome.
That way people can just click on it.
Yeah,
we've done it in the past. Shout outs, man. Here's a shout out opportunity. All right.
Yep.
So you've talked a lot about your dad, so obviously he was a huge impact on you.
My greatest mentor.
Your first employee still with you?
No, people just fall out of love with it. No, I get it. Like they say, you do it for 5 years, you'll do it forever.
Right.
So Jess has been with me the longest. Jess Martin in my office has been with me 5 years.
Right.
So it's forever now, Jess. And
5 years, you meet the mark, right?
But Jess is incredible. He's from the Midwest, so he's got all the Jessisms. He's from South Dakota.
Right.
So like he says Toyota, things like that. Just got that charm to him.
Yeah.
People down here just eat that up. So everybody loves Jess. Got Keith Gordon in my office. He's been with me 3 years. He's incredible. He's former military, so he's definitely, he's got that servant leadership.
Yep.
He's been instrumental with me bringing on, 3 new people, taking on that leadership role.
Right.
Definitely some strong future, for Keith in the business. And he's done that at the detriment of his own production.
Right.
It just tells you where Keith's heart is.
Sure.
Michael Ashdow's been with me 2 years. He's actually at our corporate office this week, getting a baptism by fire, so to speak, on commercial insurance. So like
he's getting a lot of Kool-Aid.
He's getting a lot of Kool-Aid right now. Like Goosehead is cool because like they won't just let you start writing a product like commercial insurance willy-nilly, right? Like they require you to be at a certain point in your career and to establish yourself enough to go like, hey, commercial insurance is a whole nother animal.
Right.
In our portfolio, commercial is not super robust, but like there's still a lot of opportunity for mistakes in commercial insurance. So he's at commercial training this week.
Right.
Ashdow's an awesome guy. I have to call him Ashdow now because we have another Mike. So my brother-in-law works with us now. Had his wife, Chelsea. They're pregnant. So I got him out of the oil field. He's super salt of the earth kind of guy. Great on the phone. Loves to talk to people. Just, has that heart for it. Just going to tell you exactly how it is. And so Michael Stroud, he's been great. Lance Sellers was actually the first guy. He's been with me 4 months now. First one that I've ever hired with insurance experience. Because I don't want to untrain bad habits.
No, true.
Right. But when I met with Lance, Lance and I, people kept telling us we should work with each other. Right. And so finally we just got together and was like, hey, what's this about? And so I could just tell instantly with Lance that like his heart was in the right place.
Yeah.
He just needed a portfolio to be successful. And Lance hit the ground running. He's incredible. We have our first bilingual producer.
Yeah.
Also, the lady in the office.
Oh, man.
Sarah, you're amazing.
Yeah. You got to put up with a lot.
Sarah Zarate, Sarah Galvan. She's beautiful. She's amazing. She's bilingual.
Yep.
Like a goose to water. She's taken to it, and she's going to be incredible and open up another market for us. We have to be able to serve the community that we serve appropriately. And she definitely helps us do that. My mom's been in real estate for 30 plus years in Tyler.
Really?
So the family and dad were like their own little power couple, right? Like dad did the insurance, mom did real estate. What was really funny is when I was moving back to Tyler, I actually asked her, I said, should I do real estate? Like, I think I'd be really good at it. Or should I do insurance? And she said, look, if you want to have a wife and a life, you need to do insurance like your dad. Because it's more 9 to 5 than real estate is. Little did she know that I would be so involved in the real estate community that I would be doing real estate hours for insurance money. That's my story and I'm sticking to it, but I think I'd be good at both of them. But mom's been instrumental. My parents really just showed me the right way to do business. And it was always, hey, again, you begin with the end in mind in that you are serving your community with heart.
Yeah.
And so that's always the approach that we've taken. Love my parents for that. I've had a lot of people in business that have been incredible. Sort of a mentor of mine. One of my dear friends, Chris Buford, his dad, Jeff Buford, Buford Television, Buford Media Group, just watching how you can scale something by doing it the right way, and not being the smartest person in the room, right? You surround yourself with people that are good at things that you're not good at, that aren't afraid to speak up and maybe a little smarter than you.
Yeah.
And so that's been, helpful for me in growing the kind of team that I have.
Oops. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Look at do we burn it somehow?
Yeah. So, totally fine. We're at an hour 44.
Oh, wow. Shoot. I knew we were over.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I talked a lot. You take the golden nuggets out of that.
Well, cool, man. Look, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I knew we would go over because you got a lot to unpack, right? A lot of great information.
I hope everybody's awake.
Yeah.
At this point,
Insurance isn't the sexiest subject,
Right.
but if you do it right, it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, when I was making my note card for this one, I was like, there's going to be a lot of content. There's a lot to understand, and there's a lot of dynamics to you, man. You got a lot of things that are happening that are really positive and, a lot to be blessed about.
For sure.
Then we got into barrel picking and all that kind of stuff,
awesome.
which is fun for you to hear and me to talk about.
Can I give a quick shout out before we cut it off altogether? So the White House ISD Education Foundation. If you are a White House educator, we're going to give money away. Oh, really cool to be on the other side of it. Boards are so much about fundraising and that kind of thing. With the White House Education Foundation, obviously we raise money, but we also get to give grants to teachers to fund programs that they think are really cool and valuable for kids. Whether it be math or science or reading, things like that, living chess sets. Cool stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Those grants are due next week. And then we're going to get on a bus and we're going to go give those grants away at the end of this month. And it's going to be amazing. So shout out White House ISD Education Foundation. If you're a teacher, it's not as hard as you think. Write that grant because we have a lot of money to give away.
Yeah. You need to get them to like and follow.
Like and follow.
Yeah.
Spirit.
Well, you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to help us out.
Here we are, man.
All right, cool. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. A lot of good content. I loved it. It was a great time. Always is. Josh and I, this is our 5th one. This is probably the most content we've unpacked, but it's really good. It's great content. Really enjoyed it. Our next episode, we're going to learn about solar panels. So it's going to be pretty interesting. 9 times out of 10, when you learn about that, it's going to be sales rep right in front of you. So we're going to take the stress off. We're going to have some professionals here that are going to talk about that, and looking forward to it. Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.